just when you thought the Federal Reserve was starting to gain control of inflation, they have plans to print $1.5 trillion after the November rate cuts. Now, here's what's interesting about that. An inflation report just came out the other day, and it shows that inflation actually went up to 3% in September. So the question becomes, why would the Federal Reserve print off $1.5 trillion if the United States is already dealing with high inflation that's been hard to get under control? So we're going to talk a little bit about that so you can understand the method behind what they're actually doing here. So really three main reasons why the Federal Reserve decided to start printing off more money. And the first one is that they want to support the Treasury and also help with the government debt. Because we can see that the U.S. national debt hit $38 trillion just the other day. So here's the problem. When the government has that much debt, they have to constantly borrow money. And in order to borrow money, they issue Treasury bonds. And because the interest rates are high, those Treasury bond yields tend to be a higher interest rate. That means that the money that the government is paying back, they're actually having to pay back a higher cost for borrowing that money because the interest rates are higher. So basically this debt just got a whole lot more expensive. Unfortunately, the bond market has been on shaky ground. So while the government wants to continue borrowing money, there's not a lot of buyers for these bonds. So what the Federal Reserve is doing is basically stepping in and printing off more money and buying some of those Treasury bonds in order to keep the bond market stable. So basically what the Federal Reserve is saying is we'll print more money in order to keep the system more stable. And they're prioritizing stability over inflation. The next reason why the Federal Reserve would print off more money is to help the private credit industry. Right now, we know that the private credit industry is not doing too well, and there's a lot of worries about banks overextending themselves and sitting on bad loans. So basically, the Federal Reserve is saying, hey, banks, since you're sitting on bad loans, we need to inject more money into your institution in order to make it so you can offset the bad debt that you do have with more assets. And lastly, believe it or not, the Federal Reserve might take a look at inflation and decide that it's actually good inflation and not bad inflation. Now, you may think that all inflation is bad, but that's not necessarily true. Sometimes inflation is caused by growth and demand, meaning that people are paying more for things because they want them more. So they're willing to pay a premium for them. In that case, it's actually good inflation. And so what may have happened at the Federal Reserve is they may have taken a look at inflation and decided that this is good inflation because it's creating more growth and demand in the economy. And since it is, we don't want to stop that growth in the economy, so let's just print off more money to keep that demand going. So yeah, it sounds like the money printer's back on, and now you know the reasons why.